Shabbat Shalom, everybody. December has begun, and you know what that means for people of America. It's Christmas time. But of course, as I mentioned in my Migdalor article, since Hanukkah almost always begins prior to Christmas, if it is Christmas time, then it must also certainly be Hanukkah time as well. So, because Hanukkah will soon be upon us, we will soon be recalling our story of victory against the Seleucids, who are often referred to as the Greeks. This is a story of the urges of assimilation and the strength to retain our Jewish identity. To the Maccabees, Greek culture was quite offensive, but as a lover of fiction, I can't help but enjoy stories from Greek mythology and Greek legends. They are, frankly, just a lot of fun to me. And one of my favorite things about Greek legends is that the stories often contain great dramatic irony. The audience is often aware of things that the characters themselves are not. One classic example is the story of Oedipus, who marries his mother without realizing it. And another great example is the Odyssey, in which Odysseus disguises himself as a blind beggar and must maintain the illusion that he has died, having people slander him to his face without them realizing who he really is. And of course, that makes it all the more dramatic when he finally reveals himself. If a Maccabee told me that it was wrong to enjoy these stories, however, I would tell them to relax. Because though the Greeks conventionally believed in many gods, and we only believe in one, our legends and the Greeks' legends have so many elements in common. When it comes, for example, to stories of deception and irony, I believe that our Tanakh can compete with the best of them from any culture. This week's Parsha is Vayetze, and its protagonist Jacob has his entire life story revolve around irony and deception. In fact, the story of Jacob can be taken as both a great comedy and a great tragedy. Traditional Judaism shies away from the word karma and teaches that heavenly rewards or punishments for our deeds occur only after death, if at all, not during life. But Jacob's story shows us that sometimes we do indeed reap what we sow during our lifetime. His story begins, just as many Greek legends do, with a prophecy. But in this story, of course, the prophet is not a human, but actually none other than God. Rebecca, Jacob's mother, asks God why her pregnancy is so painful. And God responds to her that the twins in her womb are fighting. And though both of them will be a father to a great nation, in the end, the younger child will be victorious over the elder child. The elder child is Esau, and of course the younger one is Jacob. One day, Esau comes home, exhausted and starving, and begs Jacob for soup, saying that he will die if he isn't fed. Rather than saving Esau's life out of the goodness of his own heart, Jacob takes advantage of him and demands his brother's birthright in exchange for the soup. If this is something that you wanted to do, it's a wonderful way to do it. But Jacob later tricks his father Isaac, who is blind, into giving him the blessing meant for Esau, and he does this by covering himself in goat's hair to disguise himself as his brother. It was his mother Rebecca, though, who urged him to do this. The Torah says that Rebecca favored Jacob. In retrospect, this may have been a self-fulfilling prophecy. God had told Rebecca long ago that Jacob would prevail over Esau, so Rebecca may not have left anything to chance and made sure to fulfill God's words, even if Jacob himself was unaware of these words. Many years later, when Jacob was a father to Joseph and his brothers, the brothers would successfully fake Joseph's death to their father Jacob by covering Joseph's coat in goat's blood. How ironic that Jacob himself would eventually fall for a deception involving a goat after he had done this to his own father. The irony doesn't stop there. This week, we find Jacob as he runs away from Haran to escape the wrath of his brother Esau from last week's Parsha. And there he meets the love of his life, Rachel. Of course, his uncle Laban plays the famous switcheroo, thinking that he is consummating a marriage with Rachel. Jacob actually sleeps with her sister Leah instead and doesn't realize this until morning. The Torah says that the act took place while it was dark, so Jacob couldn't see who his partner really was. To the reader, this sexual accident is an act of great comedy. It's also quite ironic. In a way, this is almost like the Jewish version of Oedipus. Laban is often framed as the villain in this tale, but actually his role seems to be to give Jacob a taste of his own medicine. But the way Jacob sees things, fool me once, and I will fool you right back. Jacob later tries to convince Laban to let him go home. Ducking the question and hoping to convince Jacob to stay, Laban asks him how much he wants to be paid for his many years of servitude. And Jacob responds that he doesn't need money. He only wants the speckled goats and dark-colored sheep from Laban's flocks. Such animals were quite rare at the time in that region. So Laban agreed, thinking he was getting a bargain. Only soon enough, there were tons of these animals, and Laban understandably felt cheated. Unbeknownst to him, God had sent Jacob a dream that is rather funny, but it is Torah, so I do think I am allowed to say it on the bima. In this dream, it was a dream of goats and sheep having intercourse. This seemingly comedic dream is a part of the Torah, and like Joseph, Jacob can't resist the urge to share this strange dream with his family members. But in actuality, this dream was a set of instructions from God, instructions on how to isolate the correct animals to ensure that the ones having the intercourse would end up producing speckled and dark-colored offspring. Once again, Jacob has tricked a relative using livestock. First his father, now his uncle. And once again, rather than risk the wrath of his victim, he chooses to run away. He escapes from Laban and he takes his wives, his daughter, and his 11 sons. And pretty soon, a tragedy worthy of Homer takes place. As they flee from Laban, Rachel steals her father's idols. The Torah makes it very clear that Jacob doesn't know about this. Laban catches up to them, they argue, and among other things, he asks Jacob, "Why have you stolen my idols?" Jacob replies defensively that he did not steal the idols, and that whoever had stolen them would not remain alive. Jacob unknowingly seems to curse his wife Rachel, but she doesn't seem to die right away. And that is pretty much how this week's Parsha ends. In suspense, the readers don't know if the words of Jacob will end up coming true. In next week's Parsha, of course, Rachel does die, giving birth to their final child, Benjamin. And she is buried alongside the road to Bethlehem and is the only one of our matriarchs or patriarchs not buried in the cave of Machpelah. There is still the aforementioned epilogue involving Joseph and his brothers, but at this point, the tragedy of Jacob is essentially complete. He had plenty of amazing qualities, and I don't want to slander his name. However, he deceived his brother, his father, his uncle, who deceived him in turn. And in the end, the one who ends up paying for this seems to be the love of his life, Rachel. He didn't realize that she stole the idols, but in stealing the idols and then successfully tricking Laban in a way to make him think that she hadn't taken anything, she has taken a page out of her husband's book and essentially pulled a con on him. Until now, deceptions involving Jacob have worked out pretty well for him. Even when he was tricked into marrying Leah, he ended up with additional wives and children because of it, and he also got quite wealthy. In the end, though, his deeds seem to catch up to him. The great Rabbi Hillel is famous for saying, "What is hateful to you, do not do unto others." That is the whole Torah. The rest is commentary. In playing too many tricks over the course of his lifetime, Jacob has certainly done what is hateful to others, and he seems to have paid for it in fitting ironic fashion in a way that the Greeks would probably appreciate. Hillel also understood what it means to reap what you sow. In Pirkei Avot, it says that he found a skeleton in the water and said to it, "Because you drowned others during your lifetime, they drowned you. And in the end, they too will be drowned." This is what Judaism calls midah keneged midah, or measure for measure. What goes around often, but not always, comes around. So let us all remember Jacob and the many lessons he taught us. In this case, to spread joy, not anger or resentment. It's a lesson that, it's timeless.